You know, when we think about American history, our minds usually jump to the big names, right? The generals, the presidents. But what about the millions of ordinary people who were actually on the ground building the nation? This is the story of one of those families, the Putmans. And their life, well, it's more than just a family tree. It's a real window into the American experience itself.
So let's start our story, maybe surprisingly, near the end. These are the words of Peter Putman from 1825. He's applying for a pension for his service in the Revolutionary War, and you can just feel the pride in that sentence. This is a man who clearly valued his independence, who'd only ask for help as a last resort. It says so much about his character, but what was really going on?
Well, here's the reality. This was the official inventory of everything he owned. An old cow, a feather bed he'd had for 30 years, some cracked kettles, a broken table, and look at his debts. They were worth more than pretty much everything he had to his name. So this brings up a huge question. How on earth did a man who fought to create this country end up with so little? To figure that out, we've got to go back to the beginning.
All right, let's rewind the clock. We're going back to the beginning of Peter's story, to a time when both he and the United States were being forged in the fires of revolution.
Peter's life started with real hardship. He was orphaned at just 5 years old. I mean, growing up without parents in colonial New Jersey must have been incredibly tough. He had to learn how to be resilient from day one, a skill that, as we'll see, would be absolutely essential for the rest of his life.
So, at 18, Peter goes all in. He enlists as a private in the Continental Army. And you can see his journey here. He fights at the pivotal Battle of Monmouth. Then, and I love this detail, he marries his wife Sarah while he's still an active duty soldier. And his service ends with him being discharged from a hospital, which really tells you the kind of physical toll this war took on these guys.
Let's just try to picture what that was like for a second. The Battle of Monmouth wasn't just some date in a history book. For Peter, it was fighting in brutal, nearly 100-degree heat. This was a critical moment where the Continental Army, fresh out of that awful winter at Valley Forge, finally proved they could go toe-to-toe with the British Army, the best in the world. And Peter was right there, in the thick of it.
Okay, so the war ends, but for Peter and Sarah, the fight was really just beginning. Now came a totally different struggle, building a life, a family, and their own little piece of a new nation on the American frontier.
Like so many veterans, Peter and Sarah didn't stay put. They looked for new opportunities, and for them, that meant heading north. You can see their journey right here, from New Jersey up into the wilderness of upstate New York. They were part of this huge wave of people moving out and settling the continent. And let's be clear, life out there was anything but easy. Besides farming, the family probably got involved in the lumber trade. We're talking about grueling, dangerous work, cutting down trees all winter, then building these huge rafts to float the timber all the way down the river to sell. This was the hard labor that was literally building America's economy from the ground up. And at the heart of all this struggle and hard work was their family. Peter and Sarah raised 5 sons. These were the boys who would carry on their legacy, who they were teaching all those values of hard work and grit that had defined their own lives.
And that legacy just exploded. Check this out. Just one of their sons, Peter Jr., went on to have 13 children. 13. That one number just shows you the incredible ripple effect their family had, seeding new generations across the young country. But they weren't just building a family. They were building a community. In 1810, Peter and Sarah actually co-founded the local Methodist Church. And on the frontier, a church was so much more than a building. It was the social and spiritual hub for everyone. They weren't just settlers trying to survive. They were actively building a society from scratch.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started. We can now look at that old man in 1825 with his broken table and his debts, and finally start to understand the true measure of his life. This slide just says it all, doesn't it? On one side of the ledger, you've got his material wealth, or lack thereof. No land, some debt, a few broken tools. But on the other side, well, that's the real story. 5 sons, dozens and dozens of grandkids, a church that became the heart of a town, and a nation he helped fight for. His life wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the foundations he laid for everyone who came after him.
Peter passed away in 1835. Sarah lived another 6 years, cared for by the very sons they had raised on that tough frontier. And here's the detail that really sticks with you. When she applied for her own pension, she signed the documents with a simple X. She was likely illiterate, a common reality for so many women of her time, but it takes nothing away from her incredible strength as a pioneer and a matriarch.
So why does this one family story matter to us today?
What's the big takeaway from the life of Peter and Sarah Putman?
Their story matters because it's the American story in miniature. Through their lives, we get to see it all. The brutal fight for independence fought by regular guys, the massive migration that settled a continent, the incredible hardships of frontier life, the quiet, tireless work of building communities, and also a really difficult truth that so many of the veterans who won the war were left behind in poverty.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. Our history books are full of statues of generals and famous politicians, but the real foundation of the country was built by millions of people just like Peter and Sarah Putman. So the question isn't just about their story, it's about all of ours. How do we choose to remember and value the quiet, everyday people who do the hard work of building extraordinary nations?